Good morning, football fans, and welcome to State of the Beavers. Wipe your eyes because we have a good one today. This is your weekly look at Oregon State football, where momentum shifts, pressure builds, and every result leaves a mark on the season. I'm Brian, the brains behind the podcast. My hosts John and Stacy will be giving you the weekly breakdown, where upsets happen, expectations change, and no two Saturdays ever look the same. Now let's get into it.
Fade in, fan talk, logo on the screen, yeah, we back in the bar, yeah. Kick off on a Thursday, headphones hallway, walking to class. Talking about rankings and run game, who hitting harder, who missing gaps. Yeah. State of the Beavers, we break it down from the first down snap to the final crowd sound. From the dorm room couch to the nosebleed seats, we speaking on the trenches and the DB speed. State of the Beavers. Tap in, let's ride. West Coast weather with that Beaver pride. From the student section up to alumni. State of the Beavers. Run it back, rewind. The Beaver. Tap in, let's ride. West Coast weather with that Beaver pride. From the student section up to alumni. State of the Beavers. Run it back, rewind. Got stats in the notes app, hacks in the group chat, fire in the chat, call in, what's up, Cavallis? We talk grit, talk grind, talk balance. Game day fit, orange hoodie, black cap. Replay the clip when the pocket collapse. We pick wins, pick spreads, pick sleepers. Podcast banging for the real true believers. State of the Beavers, run it back, rewind.
This is the brief on Caleb Ward, and Oregon State's new era. So here's the deal. Oregon State wasn't, falling apart, but they were stuck, stagnant, while the rest of their league was speeding right by them. Their solution? They brought in a 36-year-old offensive coordinator named Caleb Ward, who the media is already calling the architect. So let's get into what this really means. First, the old coaching staff was let go because they were getting out-coached, not outplayed. It wasn't a talent issue. See, their former coach, Jamarcus Shepard, was fired after a whole bunch of close losses started piling up, and that pointed to bigger problems, like bad late-game decisions and just no adjustments when it mattered. Second, when they went looking for a new coach, they weren't after some big, splashy name. Nope, they wanted a specific solution with 3 non-negotiables: a coach who could win with less talent, a modern offensive mind, and, this is key, someone who develops players faster than rivals can recruit them. And finally, here's how Caleb Ward got the job. He's a film room grinder, and he brought proof. He actually showed clips of his teams making halftime adjustments that completely flipped games, and of underdog QBs just shredding top defenses. The quote that sealed it? He told them, "You don't need to beat them in recruiting every year. You need to beat them on Saturdays." His job is simple: stabilize, modernize, and win. Now. Oregon State didn't hire Caleb Ward to change who they are. They hired him to finally become who they could be.
Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're looking at the hiring of the 36-year-old Caleb Ward, the architect, at Oregon State. This is a move that comes after years of the program really just stagnating, mostly because of poor late-game execution and, well, being consistently outcoached. So the core question is this: is Ward's strategy, which, promises a quick technical fix, a realistic path to success, especially given the mandate for instant relevance? Or do the deep-seated recruiting problems demand a more traditional, long-term rebuild?
And I'm going to argue that the systemic issues, specifically the inability to elevate the roster and the history of young talent just stalling out, that necessitates a much longer timeline than this recalibration idea really allows for, regardless of his schematic talent.
And my position is that Ward's approach targets the exact functional incompetence that plagued the team. It offers the precise structural fix they need to maximize the talent they already have, and frankly, to fulfill the immediate expectation of stabilizing the program by just stopping the self-inflicted losses. Look, the hiring criteria for Ward were pretty clear. Find a coach who can win with less. This wasn't a desperate search for talent. It was a competent search. We know they have elite players. The roster has genuine blue-chip guys like running back Anthony Hankerson and receiver Trent Walker. The failure was in using them, especially late in close games. Ward presented proof of concept. He showed film, he showed specific tactical adjustments and personnel rotations that completely flipped high-leverage third quarters. So this is not a foundational rebuild because the materials are there. It's an immediate structural fix to stop losing games they should be winning.
Right. But I think you're defining the program's stagnation a bit too narrowly. The material shows the struggle wasn't just poor play calling. It was that younger talent plateaued early, and the brand itself just struggled against rivals in recruiting. So when you say Ward's strategy to beat them on Saturdays instead of in the living room is a structural fix, what you're really defining success as is, well, risk minimization. His systems, which are built on using under-recruited players, they're designed to shorten the game, to reduce the margin for error. That is inherently defensive, and it places an artificial ceiling on the program, which is the exact opposite of what sustained competition really requires.
I get the focus on long-term systemic constraints. I do. But that perspective completely ignores the immediate mandate. The source material emphasizes the program wasn't, collapsing. It was just standing still because it was being out-strategized every single week. If the talent plateaued because of outdated coaching and poor development, then Ward's technical mastery is the direct cure for that. We don't need a whole new crop of recruits if we can unlock the potential the previous staff just couldn't access. Ward is the engine for that movement.
Okay, but that argument just fails to account for the sustained pressure of the talent deficit. Ward is betting the entire farm on flawless, week-to-week execution. The thin margin for error he accepted means that success is always going to be judged relative to perfection. And history shows that sustained competition in a tough league, it demands depth and resilience that, technical fixes alone just cannot provide. Ward might stabilize a late-game error, sure, but the ultimate ceiling remains low compared to rivals who consistently out-recruit them. He acknowledged those disadvantages, but true sustainability requires addressing that talent gap he downplayed.
But Ward's entire premise is that the technical mastery, the sophistication of his offense, and his proved ability to adjust can consistently compensate for those disadvantages, at least enough to meet the demand for instant relevance.
That's a compelling idea. But what about the reality of the league that had already passed the program by? When the systemic challenges are tied to things like geography and institutional brand, those schematic gains can prove insufficient pretty quickly. Ward might achieve some temporary stabilization by cutting down mistakes, sure, but the quest for true sustainability, that demands a longer talent pipeline than the immediate expectations allow for. The challenge is fundamentally structural, not just schematic.
At the end of the day, Ward was the focused solution Oregon State wanted. His commitment to closing out games and maximizing the current roster, that offers the most direct and fastest route to stabilizing the program and fulfilling that core expectation to stop giving away winnable games.
And while Ward absolutely provides some desperately needed competence, the systemic realities, I think, dictate that this is a temporary fix. The program's challenges extend far beyond just predictable play calling, and the pursuit of sustained competitiveness against better rosters requires a patience that the athletic department has explicitly denied him.
So the inherent risk he embraced is accepting a job where his progress will be judged solely by performance, not by hype for the future. And the question remains whether that technical mastery can truly outweigh these deep-seated institutional constraints, at least in the short term.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. And we're back.
Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're looking at the inaugural season gridiron schedule and the pretty huge mandate given to the new head coach, Caleb Ward. He's called the architect, brought in to recalibrate the program and fix a history of poor late-game management.
And that brings us to our central question. Does this year-one schedule actually help him build that stability he needs, or does it actively get in the way?
I'm going to argue that this high-pressure schedule is not just a challenge, it's a necessary blueprint for development.
And I'll be arguing that while the pressure is there, the schedule's logistics are so tough, they might just undermine the very stability Ward was hired to create, right out of the gate.
To my mind, this schedule is less of a hurdle and, well, more of a perfect tool for what Ward needs to fix. I mean, look at the sequence. Bowling Green, Fresno State, Army, and then that massive Oregon game in Week 4. That immediate ramp up in intensity followed by the Week 5 bye, it directly tests his whole philosophy of making high-stakes, in-game adjustments. It's a calibration tool, plain and simple, designed to expose and fix the very failures that plagued the last regime.
It's a powerful way to look at it, sure. But let's consider the practical side of this for the players and the staff. You're framing it as a competitive challenge, but I see it as unduly harsh because of logistics. We're talking about 3 Friday night games and 4 10:30 p.m. Saturday kickoffs inside the first 7 weeks. A first-year coach trying to install a modern offense, he needs every single hour for film and recovery. This kind of schedule, it just obliterates the recovery window and disrupts the normal practice rhythm you need to install complex new ideas.
I do see your point on the late kickoffs. I do. But isn't a coach of Ward's caliber, the architect, expected to manage that? To delegate? The schedule is testing his management philosophy, not just his X's and O's. That pressure cooker of a start, culminating with Oregon, and then that immediate Week 5 break, it's perfect. It gives him 5 clear days to review film and cement the very closing game strategies they were just forced to use under fire. That's how you build a culture.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. You call it a test. I see it as being thrown into the deep end with concrete shoes on. That logistical mess risks compounding the exact instability he was hired to fix. When your roster is just constantly recovering from late-night travel, they simply can't assimilate the complex skills a modern offense demands. And look ahead, you have a huge road game at Iowa State in Week 8. If the team is already gassed from that chaotic opening stretch, they're walking into Ames already at a disadvantage. This also brings up the bye weeks. You know, that Week 5 break feels way too early for any real deep learning in the new system. It's a pause after a sprint, sure, but what Ward really needed was sustained time for development. Then you have the second bye in Week 13. I mean, okay, it shows they're worried about late-season fatigue, but it feels more like an admission of a brutal schedule than a solution to it.
See, I disagree on the timing of both. The mandate was to fix late-game management, and you have to establish that culture of closing games early. The Week 5 bye lets those lessons sink in right away. And as for Week 13, I'd argue that shows foresight. It gives them maximum readiness for that critical Week 14 rematch with Washington State. Remember, they play Wazoo twice. That late break is essential to be flawless for that final, crucial test. The early pressure builds the foundation, and the byes let Ward reinforce it. At the end of the day, what this all really illuminates is that the inaugural season gridiron schedule is, well, it's an incredibly demanding blueprint by design. It's forcing Caleb Ward's program to execute his philosophy immediately, with absolutely no soft landing.
I agree, but the real tension here isn't just the quality of the opponents. It's the structural volatility from all those Friday and late-night kickoffs. That logistical burden, especially in the opening weeks, is going to challenge Ward's ability to stabilize things just as much as any team he faces on the field.
The schedule makes one thing undeniable. The mandate is immediate results under intense scrutiny, and every single variable seems designed to test that.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Sun on the brim so bright. Talking about Saturdays, all through a Tuesday night. Yeah, cruising down campus. Sun on the brim so bright. Talking about Saturdays, all through a Tuesday night. Yeah. Welcome to the dam, pull up a seat. We chew through tape, not just receipts. From Corvallis grass to the West Coast.
Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is the Collegiate Gridiron preseason outlook and the absolutely pivotal Week 1 schedule.
And we're really examining where the true indicator of a season's trajectory lies. Is it in those high-stakes, established top 25 clashes?
Right, the necessary national standard.
Or is the more substantive signal found in the immediate performance of, say, a strategically recalibrating program like Oregon State under their new head coach Caleb Ward?
Exactly. I'll be making the case that the deeper, more predictive story is found in assessing that kind of organizational structure, not just the big headlines.
And I'll argue for the primacy of those national top 25 matchups, and of course the early performance of the Heisman Watch players.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Look, the season's narrative is set immediately by the battles between established elite programs. We aren't talking about marginal movements here. We have definitive Week 1 matchups, like number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State and LSU against number 7 Clemson. These games mean they instantly determine a contender's margin for error for the entire year. Furthermore, the national conversation will be driven by the early efficiency of Heisman contenders, guys like Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, and quarterback Garrett Newsmatter.
their ability to deliver under that kind of pressure, well, that establishes the athletic standard for the year.
See, I'm just not convinced that focusing on 2 or 3 games really determines the organizational health of the entire sport. I think the more substantive measure is observing whether a program can execute a true recalibration. Oregon State hired Caleb Ward, the architect, specifically because his philosophy centers on structural efficiency. It's about how to win with less and, crucially, to dramatically improve late-game management and adjustments. Those were the very issues that plagued the previous regime's back-to-back losing seasons. His mandate is to compete immediately, so the ability of his roster, led by HB Anthony Hankerson, who's rated a 91, to secure victories in those early games, starting with Bowling Green in Week 1, that is a far more insightful indicator of sustainable, modern success than a single top 10 outcome.
But that perspective fundamentally misunderstands how media narratives and, the playoff structure actually shaped the season. The Texas-Ohio State game is a direct litmus test for national championship viability, precisely because of those stakes. The victor earns immediate credibility, the defensive coordinator gets the validation, and the loser faces this incredibly arduous climb. It gives you definitive, high-fidelity data on things like offensive line depth and defensive readiness that you just cannot glean from a routine victory against a Group of 5 opponent.
I understand the magnitude of that clash, of course. But doesn't focusing only on the top 3 ignore the fundamental problems exposed in the material? Ward's whole mandate was to stop losing games it should be winning. The program had real structural deficiencies, causing them to fail in close contests. The success of Ward's modern offensive mind against Bowling Green is not a measure of national ranking, it's a crucial test of structural competence. If his scheme fails to score efficiently, or if they accumulate costly late-game penalties, then the entire architect narrative just collapses. The foundational issues remain unresolved, regardless of which blue blood loses in primetime.
But the preseason outlook is intrinsically shaped by elite talent. That shaped the predictive model. The Heisman Watch highlights this. It emphasizes skill players who can create explosive plays no matter the coverage. I mean, even if you look at the Oregon State roster, wide receiver Trent Walker, N86, is their key contributor. The best teams rely on these high-end individuals to win in isolation. Scheme can only mask a talent deficit for so long, and those Week 1 losses by top teams are typically due to simple execution failures by star players, not some systemic organizational collapse.
I'm just not sold on that line of reasoning, because Caleb Ward was hired specifically based on proof on film that his offenses performed above their talent level. His model is built on superior scheme and preparation overcoming recruiting disadvantages. This is the structural tension we should be watching. Is the season decided by the best players or the best preparation? The LSU versus Clemson game, well, it simply shows which blue blood has the better athletes on that particular day. The outcome of Oregon State demonstrating they can close games with superior adjustments, that shows organizational health and real structural change, which is a far more lasting and frankly an undervalued story.
I think the early season metrics confirm that the pace car for this sport is still driven by the traditional heavy hitters. The sport's direction and standard are set by the established elite, and those top 25 clashes and Heisman performances, they remain the strongest predictors of the national outcome and the prevailing narrative that ultimately determines the playoff bids.
That's a compelling argument, but what about the long game? The material highlights the importance of institutional recalibration over mere flash. So we have this clear structural tension between the traditional ranking model, which favors immediate spectacle, and the strategic, patient approach of a coach like Ward, which prioritizes player development and sustainability. The full story of the season requires attention to both the national noise and that quiet mandate for structural success.
And that's going to do it for this episode of State of the Beavers. Your home for everything Oregon State football. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back breaking down the next matchup, the biggest storylines, and what it all means for Beaver Nation. Until next time, for everyone here at State of the Beavers, go Beavs.
Fan talk, logo on the screen, yeah, we back in the bar. Yeah, kickoff on a Thursday, headphones hallway, walking to class. Talking about rankings and run game, who hitting harder, who missing gaps. Yeah. State of the Beavers, we break it down from the first down snap to the final crowd sound. From the dorm room couch to the nosebleed seats, we speaking on the trenches and the DB speed. Tap in, let's ride.